Welcome into another edition of Talkin Ducks. Oregon getting the come-from-behind victory against Washington State. We'll tell you what we saw on this team and what it means for them moving forward. Plus, we highlight a few playmakers starting to develop on offense, and then Bo Nix quietly having the best season of his career. But let's go ahead and get to our opening drive, brought to you by Les Schwab Tire Centers. Les Schwab doing the right thing since 1952. And joining us, we have Joey Harrington, Anthony Newman, and chiming in from time to time because he's so busy and on the road because he's very important, we'll have Aaron Fentress from the Oregonian. But fellas, let's get started with this. Obviously, this is a great show. Aaron isn't joining us live, and Oregon is coming from a wild come-from-behind victory. Joey, Oregon dropped 28 points in the fourth quarter, 22 unanswered, to come back and get the win against Washington State on the road.
You know, this is, I was watching this game, and I don't want to say it was reminiscent to last year, but how many times over the last couple years have we seen an Oregon team get to the point where it's gut check time, right? And over the last couple years, that's been the point where Oregon seems to fade away, where they make the mistakes, where they say, you know what, it's okay, we came close, and that's good enough. That's not what Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi and Bo Nix, that's not what they're made of, and they showed it this weekend. It's funny. My mom, I talked to her after the game, and she's like, "That's the best Oregon game I've ever watched." And I said, "Well, hold on. Let's not forget, 20 years ago." But she said, "I was so nervous, I couldn't enjoy those games, but I could enjoy this game because you weren't playing. But I could enjoy the fact that they came back. I could enjoy the fact that they fought. I could enjoy the fact that it was a great football game." And I think that's the biggest thing for me watching this is it was enjoyable. And we got to see something that we haven't seen from an Oregon football team in a little while, which is overcoming some significant adversity. Now, I'm not saying they haven't had big wins. Going on the road to Ohio State last year was a big win. But I can't think offhand of a time when they really were in the position that they were, on the brink of losing, and came back and put the pedal down like they did. It was great to see.
Anthony, obviously one of the most exciting fourth quarters we've seen in a long time. And as Joey said, it really speaks more than just the talent level of this team. You really got a chance to see the heart and soul of these guys.
Well, I think this team has been tested all year, and I think people have been knocking them. I mean, the first game, you're playing Georgia. Okay, Georgia's a very good football team, probably the best team in the country. And then you come back and you play Eastern Washington. You better beat them bad. They put up 70 against Eastern Washington. And then, you got BYU at home, the 12th ranked team in the country, well-coached team. I don't know about that one. No, you put 40 on them, beat them 40-21, something like that. And then you go to Washington State. No one gives you a chance going into Pullman. Now, it's not cold, but it was a nice brisk day. And then it's hard to play there. But all of a sudden now you deal with adversity, come from behind, score 29 points or something like that in the fourth quarter to win it. That's playing football. That's dealing with or I should say not dealing with the outside noise and just playing the game that you know how to play.
Speaking of noise, let's go ahead and hear from Aaron Fentress, his thoughts on Dan Lanning and this Oregon team after the win and our first 4 games of the season.
Look, I know everyone wants to judge coaches, not just week by week, but quarter by quarter, play by play. It's just a crazy world out there in sports fandom. But look, coming into the season, Dan Lanning's first. I'm not going to judge him on anything. If it been a 6-6, I'd give him a pass. It's not necessarily his team. His first year as a head coach. You have to allow people to grow. But what we see, aside from the Georgia game, which they were just overmatched in, that just got flushed that thing. They've taken care of business the last 3 weeks. And, the most important thing I think they've shown is bounce back. They bounced back from the Georgia loss, which was embarrassing. And then in this game, they bounced back on the road. And, games like the Washington State game are going to be unavoidable. You're going to have games where you make mistakes, get silly penalties, throw a pick six, miss some coverages, miss some tackles. And next thing you know, you're losing. But can you rebound from that? And I think we saw the resiliency from this team. And that's a testament to the entire coaching staff, including obviously Dan Lanning. So far so good. There's nothing not to like about Dan Lanning, either from the personality we've seen and the enthusiasm and the response of the players thus far.
All right, guys, well, we just heard from Aaron, and really, you look at this team, we've now got a sample size of 4 games. What do we know about this team at this point here, Joey? We feel like you're third of the way through the season for the most part. You've played a very, very good team in Georgia, and then obviously 2 very talented teams in BYU and Washington State back-to-back. What do you take away now at this point in the season?
A couple things. I'll just briefly touch on what I saw defensively, which is they need to tackle better. Right? This has been kind of an inconsistent tackling group. When they tackled well against BYU, dominant. When they didn't tackle well, when they tackled horrifically against Georgia, you saw what happened. This was kind of a tweener game. I think defensively they have potential, but they need to clean up details. Offensively, this is an offense that's going to be led by this offensive line. I mean, the only O-line in the country not to give up a sack this year. They've been dominant up front in terms of opening holes for the running game. They've got a stable of running backs. And what it's allowed them to do is, or I should say has allowed Bo to do, is not feel like he has to do it all by himself. To feel like he can be that guy that doesn't have the pressure that he had the moment he walked onto campus 4 years ago at Auburn. And you're seeing the guts come out. You're seeing the leadership come out. Those things are able to thrive when you don't feel the pressure of having to carry everybody. And that comes from this offensive line. The receiving core is, I think, coming along a little slower than maybe some of us would have guessed or had hoped for. But as long as you have this O-line playing the way they are, everybody else has a chance to thrive.
Yeah, Anthony, I mean, has it been enough of a sample size to really get an idea of what this Oregon team is capable of doing now that we've seen them go 3-1 to start the season?
Well, here's what I like. This team knows how to finish the game. I mean, you and Joey, not Aaron, but all of us, all our lives playing football, we have heard, how do you finish the football game?
Aaron played football too. Come on, someone's got to stick up for him.
How do you finish games? How do you finish practice? How do you finish the play? And that's what we saw in Oregon. Finish the game. Even though you're behind, even though you're struggling, even though the team is playing good, even though Cam and Ward is balling out. But figure out how to finish the game. That's what they did well. And then another thing, when you talk about defense, you talk about tackling better. Well, here's what I saw with the stats. The linebackers were leading the team in tackles in this game. And Noah Sewell was at the top. That's the guy that we're looking for. That's the guy that we're looking to fly around and lead this football team. So, again, defense, yeah, he gave up some things, but you didn't break. You gave up some little things that are going to happen in a football game because this game is made for offense to win, but you didn't break. And when you had to make those important stops, you did.
Anthony, I love it. We will have a defensive segment later in the show, too. Don't worry. You don't got to go everything in the first segment here, my man. So, all right, stick around. When we come back, plenty more to get to on Talkin Ducks. We'll take a look at Bo Nix, who is quietly having one of his best seasons ever. We'll let you know why when we return. Talkin Ducks.
This is Abby and Bob. In 1964, these two high school pals started it all. Almost 60 years later, we still keep our word to the people of the Pacific Northwest to make the best pizza with the freshest ingredients. And that's a promise we will always keep.
Par Lumber is committed to providing the best customer service. We provide personal service. We're problem solvers. We're positive and courteous. We're competent and professional. We are committed to delivering exceptional service every time. We're appreciative and we care. We are Par Lumber.
The road can be a crazy place. Uh-oh! That's why Les Schwab Tires fixes brakes, steering, and more. And those guys don't. Keep driving. I'm just glad Les Schwab puts my safety first, so I can backseat drive with confidence.
Hit the road safely with Les Schwab and save up to $200 when you buy select tires with financing. Les Schwab Tires, celebrating 70 years of doing the right thing.
At Par, we're more than just lumber, because we know people want more than just lumber. That's why we sell grills, sealers, stains, wheelbarrows, rags, bags, extension cords, shop lights, saws, blades, ladders, and, oh yeah, Yeti coolers, and Yeti thermoses.
Building a deck? Par Lumber has a wide variety of composite and wood decking products in stock. Stop by and let our knowledgeable staff help you choose the perfect decking material for your project.
Abby's loves the Pacific Northwest so much, we named one of our favorite pizzas after it, the P&W Chicken Pizza, featuring loads of chicken, onion, country bacon, and Canadian bacon piled to the edge. Family-owned Abby's, a legendary pizza tradition.
It's time for some excellence on the field, presented by Ferguson Wellman. Ferguson Wellman taking a disciplined approach to investing, and like our good friends at Ferguson Wellman, we've seen a lot of discipline from Bo Nix and Joey. What can you say? Here's a quarterback on the road that throws a pick six when you're in the red zone, able to rally back when their team's down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. And when you look at just his poise, what stands out to you about what he displayed in this win against Washington State?
You know, it wasn't Fentress. I was going to say last week Fentress said, but it was somebody else among the conversation through the week that said Bo Nix's performance is significantly different on the road versus at home. And that's like been the good Bo, bad Bo. And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to believe that. And then I saw the pick six and I thought, man, maybe that is the case. But from that point forward, what I saw was leadership. What I saw was gutting something out, right? That's the difference between, you know, those guys that flash statistics, or the guys that, you know, pass the eye test, and the guys that you say, oh, they're not going to be a great quarterback because they don't have big numbers, but they lead their team to victory, right? That's what being a quarterback is being about, is about leadership. It's about rallying the team. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be pretty. But what Bo did in, you know, we'll say the second half, call it the fourth quarter of the last game, showed me more about him as a leader than I think anything that he could have done, you know, all the good things that he's done over the last couple games. That fourth quarter was one of those moments where you show a team, this is who I am, this is how we're going to play, and get on board, because you know what, if you don't, then we're going to leave you behind and find somebody else who wants to fill that spot. And those are the kind of guys you need on your team. He was absolutely fantastic.
All right, we are contractually obligated to get Aaron Fentress' thoughts on Bo Nix. So here's Aaron once again on Nix.
Okay, Jordan, we gave Bo Nix a lot of praise for how he played against Eastern Washington and BYU. He looked dominant. However, the running game was rolling, the defense was shutting down the other team, and they were killing it both days. And what I wanted to see from Bo Nix was, could he step up in a game where something was going wrong? In this case, they were giving up points. They were losing. It was late, and he had made a critical mistake earlier in the game with that pick six, which was a huge at least 10-point swing right there. But dude stepped up big time, had the game of his life. We all know that Washington State, look, Oregon's had a lot of success against Washington State, but going up there, I remember some games where they either lost or it was pretty dicey late. Bo Nix was in a hostile environment against a pretty darn good Washington State team, and he came up big time. 423, are you kidding me? 423, and the game-winning touchdown pass to Franklin, thoroughly impressed. Now, he has 10 touchdown passes already. His career high is 16, which came his freshman year. If they continue this type of offensive potency with the passing game, I mean, they're going to be really, really difficult to beat.
So, Anthony, I think what really stands out to me is so far, we've talked about the sample size of 4 games and what are we learning from Oregon. Bo Nix, if you look at his numbers, highest career completion percentage at this point, 72% compared to in the mid-60s before. 10 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions, 2 of which came against Georgia. Do you get the sense, or I guess I should ask the question, is Bo Nix better than advertised for Oregon? Because coming in, not too many people felt he was going to win games for the Ducks. He needed to be a manager. But you look at this line, and what do you take away?
Well, here's what I see in Bo Nix. He's not trying to be Superman. He's not trying to win the games by himself. When you watch him at Auburn, you know, he's doing everything. At Oregon, he has a supporting cast. He has some receivers to throw to, down the field, short bubbles and hitches. He has a great running game. Okay, the running backs, we'll talk about them. They're a beast. Okay, he has a defense on the other side of the ball that can play. And the most important thing is the offensive line. He has a great offensive line to give him time to throw the football, have a great running game. So Bo Nix is being comfortable. He's just doing what he needs to do and not trying to win this whole thing. And I see that comfort level in him as he's playing with his teammates.
All right, Joey, matchup against Stanford. This is a Cardinal team that has struggled on defense. Now, they've played some very good competition, but from the Bo Nix perspective, what does Oregon need from him as they get set to take on Stanford at Autzen Stadium?
Exactly what they've gotten from him the last 3 games. And I think that's the key. Anthony hit it right on the head, is they don't need him to be anything different. They don't need him to be anything, I don't want to say anything special, because, at some point during the season, everybody needs to be special. Maybe his moment was the 4th quarter this last week. But you're going to be playing a team in Stanford that defensively, they've given up 40 points over each of the last 2 games. Now, like you said, they played SC and played Washington, both of whom look to be pretty good offensively this year. But they don't need Bo to do anything other than just be Bo. And I think that's the difference this year, is when you come into Auburn, literally tagged as the franchise, the savior, the golden boy, to come in and start as a true freshman, there's pressure that goes along with that. He doesn't have that here at Oregon, and he doesn't need to be anything other than the quarterback and the leader that he's been so far this year.
All right, stick around. When we come back, we'll talk more about this Oregon defense. Underneath Dan Lanning, a defensive guru, how do they shape up so far? We'll let you know when we come back.
This is Abby and Bob. In 1964, these 2 high school pals started it all. Almost 60 years later, we still keep our word to the people of the Pacific Northwest to make the best pizza with the freshest ingredients. And that's a promise we will always keep.
Par Lumber is committed to providing the best customer service. We provide personal service. We're problem solvers. We're positive and courteous. We're competent and professional. We are committed to delivering exceptional service every time. We're appreciative and we care. We are Par Lumber.
The road can be a crazy place. Uh-oh! That's why Les Schwab Tires fixes brakes, steering, and more. And those guys don't. Keep driving. I'm just glad Les Schwab puts my safety first, so I can backseat drive with confidence.
Hit the road safely with Les Schwab and save up to $200 when you buy select tires with financing. Les Schwab Tires, celebrating 70 years of doing the right thing.
At Par, we're more than just lumber, because we know people want more than just lumber. That's why we sell grills, sealers, stains, wheelbarrows, rags, bags, extension cords, shop lights, saws, blades, ladders, and, oh yeah, Yeti coolers and Yeti thermoses.
Building a deck? Par Lumber has a wide variety of composite and wood decking products in stock. Stop by and let our knowledgeable staff help you choose the perfect decking material for your project.
Abby's loves the Pacific Northwest so much, we named one of our favorite pizzas after it, the P&W Chicken Pizza, featuring loads of chicken, onion, country bacon, and Canadian bacon piled to the edge. Family-owned Abby's, a legendary pizza tradition.
Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. The offense may have taken the lead for Oregon, but it was the defense that sealed the deal. Obviously, Mace Funa, one of the most incredible interception pick sixes that we've seen from the Oregon defense in recent memory. And Anthony, you say it before, players got to make plays on defense. And for Oregon, when their backs were against the ropes and they needed to get a stop, yes, the offense did their part, but how about the defense down the stretch for Oregon? And what have you just really gleaned from what they were able to do on the road in a very difficult situation?
Well, that's so important to make a stop when you need to make a stop. And I said this earlier, and I'll say it again and again and again because I'm a defensive guy. This game is made for offense to win. Defense, we have one hand tied behind our backs. We can't do anything. We can't even blow on a receiver, otherwise it's a pass interference, okay? Or even touch a quarterback. Even look his way, we're going to get penalized. And so we're going to give up some points. And when you play a good football team, they're going to get theirs. You can't stop good football players. You can limit them, but you can't stop them. Cameron Ward is a very good quarterback, and he had a good game. In that game, maybe they should have won. But here's the deal. When Oregon's defense had to make a stop, that's when they made that stop. When you have to get off the field and give the ball back to your offense in the fourth quarter and it's late, that's what Oregon's defense did. That's what you're looking for. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Know how to finish the game. Know how to finish the quarter. And that interception by Mace Funa, and I was talking about, I think I was talking not bad about Mace Funa, but I was saying it looks like at times he was out of position, playing more like an outside linebacker. And I said maybe he needs to be an edge rusher coming off the edge, very athletic defensive end now. He was playing defensive end, looked like, and got the pick. And so now it looks like this defense is playing as a whole. Everybody, front seven and the back end, are playing well together.
All right, well, we love him. We can't get rid of him. Here's Aaron Fentress, his thoughts on the Oregon defense and one Mace Funa.
All right, guys, look, there's no doubt whatsoever, no denying at all that defense got touched up a bit. I mean, they just did. I mean, there's no other way to put it. They did shut down the run, but Ward got it going in the passing game, primarily on those screens, though. And during the game, I tweeted that Washington State loves them some screens. And so in the fourth quarter, the game on the line, the defense stepped up with a stop. And then, of course, one of the bigger defensive plays that I can remember in recent history, Mace Funa steps up with the pick six. And he said after the game that they had studied that play, the counter quick screen, that he noticed the center pulled normally than he usually does, got high past the line of scrimmage, got high behind the line of scrimmage, and that told him, quick screen. He stood there and Ward threw it right to him. It was just a great play mentally. It had nothing to do with speed or strength or agility or athleticism or recruiting stars. It had to do with a smart young man watching film, studying, and seeing that play numerous times during the game and stepping up and making a big play. What was funny is that Dan Lanning after the game said he was hoping that Mace Funa had fallen down right there so they could round out the clock. But no way, man. You're a big defensive player. You make a play like that, you're taking it to the house. Good for him. But you love to see that the defense, like Bo Nix stepped up after a big mistake. The defense was getting lit up a little bit, and they stepped up. And you just love to see a guy who's obviously really well coached step up and make really a high IQ play to help ice a victory. Very impressive.
All right, Joey. So 4 games in, we like to say here's where you can really get an idea of what a team, a unit, a crew looks like. Lanning comes in from Georgia, one of the all-time great defenses down there. He was the defensive coordinator. Now here at Oregon after 4 games, team's giving up 388 yards per game. That's 80th in all of college football, but these things take time and things were kind of tilted a little bit with that Georgia performance. In a long-winded way, my friend, what have you seen from the Oregon defense after 4 games? You studied defenses as a quarterback. What do you learn from them after 4 games?
Oh, sorry, are you talking to me?
I am. It just took me like 2 minutes to ask
Anthony
you the
just
question.
whine about defensive being at a disadvantage. Is this your little violin playing? Sorry. What have I learned about this defense? I've learned that there's potential. What we saw in the first 3 quarters against BYU was as good a defense as we have seen Oregon play in a long time. I also know that they have made a lot of mistakes. They've made a lot of correctable errors, right? And I think that's to be expected when you have a new staff coming in, when you have a new philosophy, right? But what I like are 2 things. One, we've seen that Oregon can win football games without having a dominant defense. Like that's kind of been the MO for the better part of the last couple decades. But 2, we've seen this defense have flashes against BYU of what it potentially could be. So what have I seen? I've seen something that makes me hopeful that this defense can truly turn into what Dan Lanning wants it to be, which is ideally something as good as he had at Georgia.
So now, Anthony, you take a look at what's next for this Oregon defense against Stanford. This is a Stanford team coming in. Many people thought the offense was going to be solid. Tanner McKee coming back for another year. You had E.J. Smith, Emmitt Smith's son, at running back. He is now lost for the year. A huge blow for the Cardinal, but they still have one of the most talented receiving corps in the Pac-12. Where does the challenge lie for Oregon this upcoming Saturday?
Well, it's kind of funny. The running back coach there is Ron Gould, my best friend. So we were talking during the offseason, and he was talking about the lack of running backs they have. But yet he was high on Casey Filkins, Lake Oswego product, okay, he's there now, and he had a good game last week. He had, 20 attempts, 20 carries for 100-something yards, but he's not the bell cow type of a running back they need. They're missing that running back, and that's what hurts Stanford, because Stanford, with David Shaw, wants to run the football. Now, they got some receivers, but you got to establish the run first before you can get to the receivers. They're also lacking the offensive line because the quarterback is running for his life. And so it's going to be a challenge, but they're well coached. David Shaw, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. He's going to come in, and these kids will be ready to play. So, at 8 o'clock at night, it's going to be a ball game.
Yeah, we'll get to more on the Cardinal here in just a minute when we come back. But first, when we return, we'll talk about some emerging playmakers for the Oregon offense. It seems like a couple of youngsters finally starting to step up for the Ducks. We'll have more when we come back.
This is Abby and Bob. In 1964, these two high school pals started it all. Almost 60 years later, we still keep our word to the people of the Pacific Northwest to make the best pizza with the freshest ingredients. And that's a promise we will always keep.
Par Lumber is committed to providing the best customer service. We provide personal service. We're problem solvers. We're positive and courteous. We're competent and professional. We are committed to delivering exceptional service every time. We're appreciative and we care. We are Par Lumber.
Abby's loves the Pacific Northwest so much, we named one of our favorite pizzas after it, the P&W Chicken Pizza, featuring loads of chicken, onion, country bacon, and Canadian bacon piled to the edge. Family-owned Abby's, a legendary pizza tradition.
Welcome back. Time now for our legendary moment brought to you by Abby's Legendary Pizza.
Stunt by Washington State over the middle. It's Franklin. Troy Franklin will take it to the house. Touchdown, Ducks, 50 yards.
Yeah, it was a close call, like trying to determine whether you're going to order pepperoni or Hawaiian from Abby's. But we went with Troy Franklin for our play of the game because this is what gave Oregon the lead. And Joey, you look at this Oregon offense. I did some digging, 624 yards of total offense on the road. Oregon hasn't had more yards than that since they beat Southern Utah their very first game of the year in 2017. So one of the best offensive performances in over 5+ years. You do it on the road when it matters the most. Seems like this is a much more explosive offense underneath this regime.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I was listening to part of it. I had to run out of the house for a minute, but I put the game on the radio and
Jerry Allen?
Jerry and Jorgie, sorry, I was drawing a blank. I was like, wait.
The voice of the Ducks.
We're talking about how they had almost 500 yards of offense going into that fourth quarter, but only had 15 points. I mean, it was like one of those things, they're moving the ball up and down the field, and then something clicked, right? They have shown that they can move the football. They did it against Georgia, right? They started the game with 3 drives. They just ended in turnovers, right? They've shown, that was what we said, this team can move the football. When they finish drives, when they move the ball, they're very good. When they finish drives, they're dangerous, and we saw that dangerous team in the fourth quarter. Sometimes it takes a little, a little kick in the backside. Whatever it is, that team woke up on Saturday in the fourth quarter, and I mean 600 yards and. What did they end up with? 44, I think?
44 points, yeah. And you figure, you throw the pick six, Joey, right? This game maybe isn't even as close as it is if you're able to turn that into a touchdown on that drive.
Well, you can say ifs and buts, but there were, let's just say the first few drives didn't exactly finish the way that they wanted to. But that's okay, they turned it around in the fourth.
Fair enough. Anthony, what's been fun also over the last couple of games is the development of Bucky Irving. We've been calling his name a lot, and he really showed his versatility. Gets it done on the ground with 80-plus yards, but also a receiving touchdown on 5 catches. And it's really exciting to see somebody emerging in that backfield as really one of the go-to weapons.
Well, hey, I need to apologize to Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington because, you know, a few shows back, I was really high on and talking a lot about Byron Cardwell because that's who we saw last year. And
yeah, that's what everybody said, right?
And I was just going, oh, this guy's the best. This guy's the bell cow. You know, I wasn't behind closed doors. I didn't watch practice. I'm not looking at the practice film, but yet those coaches are, and they knew something that we didn't know. Bucky Irving is a beast. That kid is so explosive. He's hard to bring down. He breaks tackles. He has great vision. He will block out of the backfield. He will catch the ball. He can do it all. And he's not the biggest kid, but watching him run is very exciting. And you're going, wait, where has this guy been? Oh, yeah, he was at another school across the country. That's where he was at. Because he's a pleasant surprise with this Oregon running game and how Oregon wants to run the football. Very fun to watch.
And then on the receiving end, Joey, Troy Franklin, a monster game, 5 catches, 137 yards, and a touchdown. And it seems like, again, he's been coming up with huge plays over the last couple of weeks. And there were questions about this receiving core as far as who would step up and who would be some of the playmakers. And the youngsters showed what they could do. But my goodness, you get a sophomore starting to have this kind of production and consistency. It's got to be very exciting for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all had our own theories about who would emerge as that wide receiver. I definitely said it was going to be Franklin. I know that Aaron said that it was going to be, Dante Thornton. I mean, I definitely didn't say that. I definitely said Franklin.
What?
I'm
surprised you just didn't say Devin Allen again. Like, oh, he's got one more year of eligibility somehow. He's coming back.
I'm going to take credit for this one too. No, what I love about Franklin is that, one, he's reliable, 2, he's explosive, right? He's strong to step out of that tackle and take it for a touchdown. Like, those are the plays that you need wide receivers to make. And when the emergence of Ferguson at tight end, Franklin on the outside, the running backs behind him, Bo Nix has somebody at each position, right? Bo Nix has somebody to make him feel comfortable no matter where the ball is going. And that's the important thing, whether it's Chris Hudson or Dante Thornton or Troy Franklin. I don't want to say it doesn't matter who it was. It's just great to see him become that go-to guy that Bo Nix needs from behind the center.
Or Chase Cota.
When we come back, we have to go. Oh, go ahead, Anthony.
Chase Cota. He's a stud.
Some love for Chase Cota. Always got to give love for Chase Cota. And for me, I'm surprised Oregon hasn't utilized him more on third down and across the middle, but that's for another conversation for another day. All right, when we come back, some craziness in the Pac-12. USC, this once unstoppable offense, runs into a literal dam against Oregon State. We'll talk more about the conference and how it's looking better than it ever has in the last 6 years when we come back on Talkin Ducks.
Abby's loves the Pacific Northwest so much. We named one of our favorite pizzas after it, the P&W Chicken Pizza, featuring loads of chicken, onion, country bacon, and Canadian bacon piled to the edge. Family-owned Abby's, a legendary pizza tradition.
The road can be a crazy place. Uh-oh. That's why Les Schwab Tires fixes brakes, steering, and more. And those guys don't. Keep driving. I'm just glad Les Schwab puts my safety first, so I can backseat drive with confidence.
Hit the road safely with Les Schwab and save up to $200 when you buy select tires with financing. Les Schwab Tires, celebrating 70 years of doing the right thing.
This is Abby and Bob. In 1964, these two high school pals started it all. Almost 60 years later, we still keep our word to the people of the Pacific Northwest to make the best pizza with the freshest ingredients. And that's a promise we will always keep.
We were in Roseburg in the early 80s. Our oldest son, Dan, was a defensive back, a starter on that team. They in fact, became Oregon State champions, setting the first undefeated 14-0 season in Oregon's history. And our kids still talk about that. I go back now, too, and I think about all those great days and great times. The neat thing is that we can go back in today and still enjoy the same quality food that we enjoyed 50 years ago. That's legendary.
Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Time now for What's Cooking, brought to you by Sam's Northwest Barbecue, located in Sherwood, just southwest of Portland. Sam's Northwest Barbecue, your source for Yoder smokers, barbecue products in the Pacific Northwest, and much more. And yes, while you take a visit to Sam's Northwest Barbecue and fire up some brisket this weekend, you can also watch some terrific Pac-12 football because, Anthony, you're looking at this conference, and after just the first week, this is going to be one of those years. USC, many people thought was going to just be this unstoppable offensive juggernaut. Well, Oregon State flexing some muscle. Beavers almost get the upset at home. USC scores a late touchdown and a late pick to seal that game. But what did you take away between those two teams? Because obviously Oregon might face USC in a Pac-12 title game potentially. And of course, we know they have Oregon State later on the schedule.
What is the deal when USC goes to Oregon State or Corvallis? It's a struggle. I mean, it's just... It's over and over and over. I don't know what's going on, but I will give credit to Oregon State because the defense played well. I mean, those receivers, they got a ton of receivers on Oregon State, on USC, and Oregon State's defenders did a great job of putting pressure on the quarterback. And then, Williams didn't play for the USC quarterback, didn't play that great. He struggled, but I think he struggled because the Oregon State's defense was really, really good. That's a game that Oregon State could have won, should have won, but you have to finish the game. And that's what we talked about earlier with the Ducks. Know how to finish games.
Just for journalistic integrity, Anthony, do you know anybody in the Oregon State secondary? Just throwing, like, you were complimenting in Oregon State secondary about what a great job they did against USC's wide receivers. Just, in the spirit of transparency, journalistic integrity, do you know anybody in the OSU secondary?
Yes.
Yeah, he does.
Yes.
We'll get to that.
Yes.
A little relationship there with Jaden Grant. But Caleb Williams, you mentioned, 16 of 36 for 180 yards and 1 touchdown. Not a very efficient outing for him. Up north, Joey, we got to talk about the Huskies. It's an Oregon show. They're undefeated. They're ranked in the top 15. Penix leads all quarterbacks in total passing yardage. You talk about a turnaround that's happening up on the lake there, and it seems like Washington has really got things going in the right direction.
Yeah, I was curious to see how they played this week because what we saw from USC against Stanford was, in my opinion, a Stanford team that moved the ball up and down the field, but had 2 turnovers in the end zone, right? Lost 41-28, put up 4 touchdowns and had two end zone turnovers. I was curious to see how Washington played Stanford. And I won't say they were better than USC, but you've talked about how Penix and what a great job he's doing in the conference this year, but that defense is actually playing pretty well also. So this is a formidable Washington team. I don't know if this is the team that's truly put everything together yet, but I don't know that anybody in this conference has truly put everything together, right? USC has weaknesses, Oregon has weaknesses, Washington State has weaknesses. At the same time, teams like Oregon State and Washington, I mean, there's also, Utah, this is a good conference top to bottom. I'm not sure that anybody is truly a great football team, or a top 5 football team, but there are a lot of very good football teams in this conference right now. And one of them is
to your point,
Washington.
Joey, you've got 4 teams ranked in the top 15. It's the first time since 2016. And Anthony, I mean, top to bottom, really outside of Colorado, Arizona, and then Arizona State, maybe Stanford, you've got 8 teams that can beat each other on any given week, it feels like. And this really speaks well for the conference, especially after all the Big Ten fiasco stuff in the offseason.
Well, that's what we need. Washington, I don't want them winning football games, but you do want them winning football games to represent the Pac-12. USC, I'm not a USC fan, but you do want USC to win football games because it's going to help the Pac-12. And when those teams are struggling, when Washington, so-called the big boys, Washington and USC, when they're struggling, then the nation is against us. Pac-12 is terrible. They're done. They don't have any teams in that league. Utah's nobody. But when those teams are winning, Washington and USC, now the Pac-12, we got a lot of guys in the top 25 now. They're pretty good. Well, we've always been good. It just those teams were struggling at times.
All right, well, don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll give you the scouting report on the Stanford Cardinal. They are hobbled coming into Autzen Stadium, and they are looking for a big-time win after a couple of tough opponents. We'll let you know what Oregon needs to do to get the dub when we come back on Talkin Ducks.
The style of play that they have is different. And again, they've had a lot of success, obviously, over the last few years. And we were able to hit on some of that history today with our team, and I think our guys are really familiar with, the success that Stanford's had in the past and have a lot of respect for that team.
That was head coach Dan Lanning. His thoughts on Oregon's matchup against Stanford. And let's rewind the clock to 2021, just last year, where Stanford gets the win at home, upsetting then number 3 Oregon 31-24 in overtime. And for the Cardinal, that would be their last win against an FBS opponent. So they've gone almost a full calendar year since they have beaten a team that has been an FBS team, and they've had a rough start this year. Joey, you look at this team, and they start the season against Colgate. I called that game, and they did what they were supposed to do. But then they played USC in Washington after having a bye in week 2. So there are some question marks around the Cardinal, and we always know Oregon has been tripped up by Stanford at home in the past. In fact, Oregon 2-4 in the last 6 games against the Cardinal. Is this a trap game for the Ducks when you look at these two teams on paper?
I think you can look at it historically and say yes, but I don't think it is this year because historically, Stanford has been incredibly stout on defense. They've had a featured running back, and they've had complementary tight ends and wide receivers, right? Not big superstar, super speed guys. They've had big targets at tight end and wide receiver that you can use as complements to a running game. They don't have that running back right now. You talked about the injuries in the backfield. And defensively, they're simply not as strong as they have been. Or at least, we're making this assumption that they're not as strong. Maybe USC and Washington are just really, really, really good on offense. And consequently, they're giving up 40 points a game. But I don't look at this and see the dominant defensive teams that I've seen from Stanford over the last decade or two. And I don't see that bell cow at running back where you can hand him the ball 20, 25 times, grind the clock. There's no Toby Gerhart running through that locker room door. So I don't think this is the same type of situation, but I still think it's the same type of Stanford team where George Shaw, there's an Oregon slip for you, where David Shaw knows who he is. He knows the talent that he recruits, and he knows how to best win football games. He might be the best manager in the entire Pac-12 in terms of knowing how to get the best out of his team. So I don't put it by him, but I don't see this as a trap game necessarily.
All right, for his thoughts on Oregon versus Stanford, let's once again hear from Aaron Fentress.
All right, last week I said I thought there were 6 losable games on the schedule. You guys scoffed a little bit, but I clarified. I didn't mean they were going to lose 6. I meant there were 6 losable games. And for me, those were Washington State, which they almost lost, Stanford, Cal, UW, Oregon State, and Stanford. Okay, but I'm scratching off Stanford right now, getting them off there. I'll talk about that in a minute. And I'm going with UCLA as the other losable game because they're 4-0, averaging 41 points per game. They're leading the conference with 220 yards rushing per game. They're going to be tough. They took the Ducks to the wire the last 2 years, so I'm going to make that a losable game. But I just don't think Stanford is losable right now. Based on what we've seen, I would be floored if the Ducks lost this game. Tanner McKee's a good quarterback. He beat them last year with a couple late drives, one in overtime. But I just don't believe they have the athletes to match it with what we're seeing from Oregon. Oregon's running game is rolling. Bo Nix, Franklin killing it. Defense lit up a little bit, but they're still good enough to slow down this Stanford team. And remember, Stanford's 1-2, but in 2 of their losses were to USC and UW. 2 good teams. I mean, there's no shame in losing those 2 games on the road, but they were getting blown out in those games and scored a combined 29 points in the respective fourth quarters of those games to make the scores not look as bad. So I see a similar situation here. I just don't think they have the athletes to match up with Oregon. I think Oregon, maybe they don't completely obliterate them, but I think they hammer them pretty good. I'm right now I'm leaning like 41-23 or something like that, 41-20. So yeah, I don't think this should be a losable game for the Ducks.
So Anthony, we get Aaron's thoughts here. You look at Stanford, and this is a team that just lost E.J. Smith for the season. That's a huge loss for them. He was their most productive offensive player. You still have Tanner McKee, one of the better quarterbacks in the conference, and they do have some loaded receivers. But to Joey's point, this is not the same Stanford defensive line, and this is not the same Stanford rushing attack. So looking at Stanford and everything that's here, what is your key to the game for Oregon against the Cardinal?
Well, think about this for a minute. When you watch Stanford play football, the guys up front take care of business. Every year, they always put about 2 or 3 guys in from the offensive line in the league. Right now, they're struggling with their offensive line. That's what the struggle is. So the running game is not there. The passing game is not there because they're giving up a lot of sacks. There's not a lot of time to throw the football to those good receivers, and that's a problem. And then what Joey said, you don't have a good defense. Well, now you really have a problem with the team as a whole. And I think the Oregon needs to really attack the offensive line of Stanford, get after, stop the running game, make the quarterback drop back in a pocket so they can get to him up front and make some plays in the back end.
Let me just kind of jump in on what Anthony said there real quick. When you don't have a dominant front seven on defense like Stanford has had historically, you don't create turnovers. Stanford only has one interception the entire season. One. And that's not a Stanford defense we're normally used to seeing.
No, and also Stanford's turned the ball over 11 times in just 3 games, 7 fumbles during that time. They certainly had some special teams miscues against Colgate and then issues hanging on to the ball against USC and Washington. And Joey, this really feels like a game if you're Oregon and you've built up what you've had to build up over the last handful of games. You want to make sure you have good tape. You want to beat Stanford, but beat them while executing well.
Say that again.
I said if you're Oregon, you want to beat Stanford and beat them while making sure you execute well.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the plan. I think this is the type of team you can do that against. Washington State seemed a bit scarier on the road, more explosive, right? Potentially one of those games where you just have to gut out a dirty win. This seems like a game where you can go in and execute your game plan. That you're not going to get thrown a bunch of curveballs, right? This is one of those games that seems to be, like I'll call it a paper, a matchup on paper. I can beat you. I can beat you. Here's where our weakness is. Let's correct it, move it, and go do it. Like, this seems like a pretty straightforward game as compared to some others that Oregon will be playing, at other times this year.
Certainly a rare sentence to say, a pretty straightforward game against Stanford. All right, we'll give you our picks and close up shop on Talkin Ducks when we come back. Ducks favored by 17. We'll let you know what the final number will be when we come back.
Abby's loves the Pacific Northwest so much. We named one of our favorite pizzas after it, the P&W Chicken Pizza, featuring loads of chicken, onion, country bacon, and Canadian bacon piled to the edge. Family-owned Abby's, a legendary pizza tradition.
The road can be a crazy place. Uh-oh! That's why Les Schwab Tires fixes brakes, steering, and more. And those guys don't. Keep driving. I'm just glad Les Schwab puts my safety first, so I can backseat drive with confidence.
Hit the road safely with Les Schwab and save up to $200 when you buy select tires with financing. Les Schwab Tires, celebrating 70 years of doing the right thing.
This is Abby and Bob. In 1964, these two high school pals started it all. Almost 60 years later, we still keep our word to the people of the Pacific Northwest to make the best pizza with the freshest ingredients. And that's a promise we will always keep.
We were in Roseburg in the early 80s. Our oldest son, Dan, was a defensive back, a starter on that team. They in fact, became Oregon State champions, setting the first undefeated 14-0 season in Oregon's history. And our kids still talk about that. I go back now, too, and I think about all those great days and great times. The neat thing is that we can go back in today and still enjoy the same quality food that we enjoyed 50 years ago. That's legendary.
Welcome back. Time now to check out our solid picks brought to you by Milan Stoneworks, bringing you the finest stoneworks in the Northwest. All right, Oregon, a 17-point favorite over Stanford at home. Joey, you already explained this is a pretty straightforward game, but give me a score prediction and then let me know which Duck you think is poised to have the biggest game and why against Stanford.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty spot on. I mean, I think this is a 41-24 type of game. 8 p.m. at Autzen.
That's late, by the way.
What's that?
Do you guys like 8 p.m. kickoffs, real quick?
No.
Real quick, Joey, are you a fan of that late of a kickoff?
No.
Absolutely not. But we digress. I don't think that anybody's more poised to have a bigger game than anybody else. I think Noah Sewell needs to have a bigger game. I think he needs to be the guy that sparks this defense, right? Because this is an offensive line, like you said, Anthony, that hasn't been playing well. They don't have a featured running back. This is a defense in Oregon that needs to have a spectacular day and make a statement. And I think Noah Sewell needs to be the leader of that.
Anthony, you got a score prediction for me, my friend?
No score, but I think Oregon's going to win big. But, Stanford's going to be coached well. I mean, David Shaw does a great job. Ron Gould does a great job. They got a great coaching staff. But I think they don't have enough dudes, to beat Oregon. I think Oregon's going to put it on them.
Now, which player do you think, though, Anthony, is most likely going to have a nice little outing here against the Cardinals?
Joey said it. Noah Sewell. I think this is a game for him because, Stanford wants to run the ball. That's their old school way. Hey, let's run the ball down the middle. Let's run it off tackle, and you're going to run it into the teeth of Noah Sewell. And then when you're going to throw the football, it's a short passing game, and you'll take a shot here and there, but the short passing game where you're running right into the teeth of Noah Sewell. So I think he's going to have a big game. And he's starting to break out. When you talk about the linebackers leading the team in tackles, he was at that top against Washington State. He's starting to come on.
I think for me, Oregon cruises to a win in this one. I've got them 45-20 over the Cardinal. I think at this point, the Oregon offense is so much more explosive. Defense starting to come into its own. As far as a Duck that will have a big day, I'm looking at Bucky Irving, some of those interior runs. Nothing flashy, but we've talked about it before. Stanford, not a lot of experience on that defensive front. They got some talent at linebackers and certainly some talent at the safety positions. But I think if you just are able to win the line of scrimmage and run the football, you should have no issues piling up yardage as well as points against the Cardinal. And for Oregon, this is a chance to really continue to put themselves in a great position as they get set for the rest of the conference slate. I think defensively for the Ducks, you just want to make sure you do a better job of tackling. I think if I'm grading the Ducks after this game, the number one thing I want to make sure is that my guys are tackling well in space, because that is a fundamental. Joy, you pointed it out, Oregon has struggled with. In fact, they led the conference in missed tackles over the last 3 seasons combined. All right, Oregon, Stanford, Autzen Stadium. Make sure you have that second cup of coffee, 8 p.m. kickoff. Make sure you tune in next week. We'll recap that game and get you set for the next one. For myself, Joey, Anthony, and of course, Aaron joining us and chiming in. We appreciate it. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you guys next time on Talkin Ducks.